The sky above Tryon 9 burned red. Explosions rolled across the horizon, lighting the clouds like thunder made of fire. The once proud city towers now lay cracked and twisted, half buried under the dust of their own pride. The people had believed the Empire's promise. No enemy could ever reach this far. No power could ever challenge them. Yet here it was, happening before their eyes. The impossible was real. The invincible was bleeding. Lieutenant Kale stood on a broken wall, his armor covered in ash. He could barely hear his own breathing through the crackling static in his helmet. All communication lines were down. The orbital defense stations destroyed. The fleet gone. Above him, the night sky flashed again, and for a second he saw them. Metallic shapes cutting through the clouds, silent and deadly. Not curved and elegant like Imperial ships, but sharp, cold, and angular. Machines built for war, not beauty. The symbols on their hulls were strange. White, simple letters that spelled a word no one in the Empire knew. Humanity. Kyle raised his rifle, though he knew it was useless. The air shimmered as one of the ships descended, its engines whispering like the breath of a storm. Then the voice came. It wasn't loud, but it filled the air like thunder wrapped in calm. "We are humanity. You came to our world uninvited. Now we return the favor." Every soldier froze. The words were in their language, but the tone was alien, firm, unshaken, certain. The voice of a people who knew war too well. Then came the light. A beam fell from the sky, and the capital vanished in silence. Hours later, only ruins remained. The Empire had lost another world, and no one even knew who their enemy truly was. On the Imperial flagship Eternal Majesty, Emperor Koran watched the footage in silence. Around him, the Grand Council whispered nervously. The Emperor's golden armor shone under the dim lights, but his eyes were heavy. He had ruled for over 200 years. He had seen rebellions crushed, invasions repelled, and empires rise and fall before his own. But he had never seen this. "Pause it," he ordered. The image froze, a frame showing human ships in formation, black against the fire of the dying world. "Enhance," he said. The symbols became clearer. HSS Vengeance, HSS Atlas, HSS Orion. Strange names, hard, direct, not poetic like Imperial vessels, which bore names such as Radiant Glory or Eternal Dawn. These names were different. They spoke of strength, not vanity. "Who are they?" Koran asked, his voice a calm rumble. No one answered. The council looked at one another. Then High Scholar Tren stepped forward. We have no record of a species called humans, Your Majesty. No archives, no trade logs, no star maps mention them." The Emperor frowned. "Then how do they know us?" Tren hesitated. "Perhaps they are a lost colony. A forgotten experiment?" "Impossible," another counselor said. "No colony could build ships like that." The Emperor leaned back in his throne. "And yet they have. In less than 1 week, they have destroyed 5 of our systems. Entire fleets gone without trace." One of the admirals stepped forward, trying to sound brave. "Majesty, perhaps we are facing pirates using stolen tech. Or a rival empire trying to weaken us." Koran's gaze turned sharp. "Do pirates erase planets? Do rivals announce themselves as humanity? No, this is something else." Silence fell again. The only sound was the faint hum of the hollow screen still showing Tryon 9 burning. The Emperor rose from his throne and walked toward the image. "I see discipline in their attack, precision. They do not fight for power. They fight with purpose." The counselors exchanged glances. One dared to ask, "Then what do we do, Majesty?" The Emperor turned, his expression like carved stone. "We find them, and we destroy them." Meanwhile, far beyond Imperial space, the human fleet drifted through the darkness. Inside the HSS Vengeance, Captain Elena Ruiz stood at the command deck watching the stars. Her face was calm, her hands clasped behind her back. Around her, the crew worked in silence, focused and efficient. There was no cheering, no celebration for the destruction of Tryon 9. Humanity did not rejoice in victory. They only marked another step in a long journey of justice. A young officer approached her. "Captain, transmissions confirm total collapse of Imperial forces on Tryon 9. No survivors detected." Ruiz nodded. "And the civilian evacuation?" "Completed, ma'am." The locals refused our aid, though. Most believed their empire would save them. Ruiz sighed softly. Faith is hard to break, even in the face of truth. She turned toward the viewport again. Prepare the next phase. We move to Sector Delta 7. Yes, Captain. As the officer left, Ruiz stared into the endless black of space. She remembered Earth. Not the shining blue marble it once was, but the scarred, broken planet left behind after the Imperial harvests centuries ago. They had come with promises of peace, then taken everything. People, resources, hope. The few who survived had sworn that one day they would return. Humanity had been silent for hundreds of years, hidden among the stars, rebuilding in secret. Now, that promise was being kept. On the Eternal Majesty, the Emperor's scientists analyzed the wreckage left behind after each battle. They were shocked. Human ships used technology the Empire could barely understand. Compact reactors, kinetic cannons, and armor that absorbed energy instead of reflecting it. Every weapon strike was measured, every movement precise. The humans didn't waste power, they calculated destruction. As the Empire scrambled for answers, strange reports arrived from across the galaxy. Outposts gone dark, fleets missing, even pirate clans whispered of shadow ships that appeared from nowhere, struck and vanished. Panic began to grow. Citizens questioned their leaders. For the first time in millennia, the Empire's people began to feel fear. The Emperor held another council. We must end this before it spreads, he declared. They think us weak. We will remind them who we are. He ordered the Third Imperial Fleet, a massive force of over 2,000 warships, to hunt down the humans. Led by Admiral Varos, the fleet departed from the capital with banners flying and engines roaring. The people cheered as the armada rose into the stars. The Empire is eternal, they cried. No one can defeat us! But deep down, some of them remembered the images from Tryon 9. The fire, the silence. The simple message that came before the destruction, we are humanity. Days passed. The fleet vanished into the void. No signals returned. Then one transmission reached the capital. It was short, damaged by static, but clear enough to freeze every heart that heard it. This is Admiral Varos. We engaged humans. Static swallowed the rest. Then a whisper, faint but chilling. They learn. The signal ended. Back on Earth's flagship, Captain Ruiz stood before a digital map showing the entire Imperial domain. Hundreds of systems marked in red. Billions of lives still living under the Emperor's rule. We will not destroy them all, she said quietly. Only those who still choose chains over freedom. Her second officer nodded. And the Emperor? Ruiz's expression hardened. He will understand what we learned long ago. Invincibility is a lie. Outside, the human fleet began to move again, their engines glowing faintly in the dark. No music, no victory lights, only the cold silence of purpose. They had come not for conquest, but for remembrance. And somewhere, far across the stars, the Emperor of a dying empire watched the darkness closing in. Realizing too late that history had found him, the fires of Tryon 9 would fade. But the legend of that night would never die. Soldiers whispered of ships that appeared from the black, silent, and perfect, wielding power beyond imagination. They said the humans were not gods, but something worse, mortals who had learned to survive everything. Everything. The great hall of the Imperial Palace stood silent. Golden banners hung still in the recycled air, each one bearing the symbol of the Galactic Empire, a blazing sun surrounded by 13 stars. It had been a mark of pride for 10,000 years, but now it felt hollow, a reminder of a promise that no longer held meaning. Emperor Corran stood before the grand display window, staring into the stars beyond the palace shields. He wondered which of those distant lights hid the humans, these ghosts from nowhere who had brought his empire to its knees. Behind him, the Imperial Council murmured among themselves. Fear had made them bold. Some spoke of surrender. Others demanded vengeance. Corran raised a hand, and silence fell. The Empire does not yield, he said slowly. His voice was deep, smooth, and heavy with age, but there was something new in it now. Doubt. We did not build this galaxy by hiding from shadows. High Admiral Vareth stepped forward, his armor glinting under the crystal lights. "Your Majesty, we have assembled the Third Fleet as ordered. 2,000 ships. Every dreadnought, carrier, and battle cruiser within reach. We will crush these humans and erase their name from the stars." Corrin nodded, but his eyes did not move from the stars. "Erase them," he repeated softly, almost to himself. "Yes, before the idea of them spreads." When the fleet departed, the entire capital world watched. Millions filled the skyports, cheering, waving banners, shouting the Emperor's name. The ships rose in long silver lines, their engines burning white trails across the upper atmosphere. Every voice shouted the same words. "The Empire is eternal!" The chant echoed through the domes and streets until the last ship vanished into the dark. For the first time in generations, the people believed they were part of history again. They had forgotten that history is not always merciful. Far beyond the core, in the quiet depths of Sector Delta 7, the human fleet moved like a shadow across the void. There were no parades, no songs, no speeches. The crews aboard the warships were calm, focused, and silent. Every man and woman aboard knew why they were there. They did not fight for conquest. They fought for the memory of what had been taken from them long ago. Inside the command bridge of the HSS Vengeance, Captain Elena Ruiz watched the tactical hologram. Dozens of blue points, their ships, glided through the system. "Status," she said, her voice low but steady. "All ships in position, Captain," reported Commander Yates. "Scanners detect multiple warp signatures incoming. Large formation, Imperial design." Ruiz nodded slowly. "They're coming." Just as expected, she turned toward the crew. "Remember," she said, "we are not here to destroy. We are here to teach." The crew nodded, though none smiled. They had heard those words before every battle. Humanity did not take joy in victory. Victory was just another step toward justice. Moments later, the void rippled. The Third Imperial Fleet arrived in perfect formation, massive ships gleaming in the light of the distant star. Their lead dreadnought, Imperial Glory, dwarfed the human vessels. Admiral Vareth stood on its bridge, watching the enemy through the holographic screen. He expected fear, but instead, the humans held their line, silent and unshaken. "Open a channel," Vareth ordered. The comms crackled. "Unknown vessels, this is Admiral Vareth of the Galactic Empire. You have violated sovereign space and attacked Imperial worlds. Identify yourselves and prepare to be boarded. You are surrounded. Surrender, and you may yet live." The reply came after a long pause, a woman's voice, calm and unhurried. "Admiral Vareth," she said, "this is Captain Elena Ruiz of the human fleet. You attacked us first. You enslaved our people. You burned our home. We are only returning what was given." Vareth frowned. "We have no record of any war with your kind." "You speak lies." "No," Ruiz said quietly. "You simply forgot. You erase what does not suit your story. But history remembers. And so do we." The Admiral's jaw tightened. "Then let history end with you." He cut the channel. "All ships, fire!" The stars erupted. Thousands of energy bolts streaked through the darkness, filling space with blinding light. But the human ships did not meet the attack head-on. They vanished. One by one, their signatures flickered off the scanners. The Imperial crews shouted in confusion. "Where did they go?" One officer cried, "Scanners can't find them!" "Impossible! No fleet can cloak this many vessels!" Admiral Vareth slammed a fist on the console. "Keep firing! Sweep the area!" But the human fleet had already moved. They drifted silently within the Varan Nebula, where radiation and gases twisted light itself. Using hidden emitters, they bent those waves around their hulls, becoming invisible even to advanced scanners. They watched the Empire's fleet fire blindly into empty space, wasting energy and ammunition. Then, without warning, the humans struck. Rail cannons fired silently, each shot like the fist of a god. The first Imperial cruiser exploded in 2 pieces before anyone could react. Then another, and another. From the Emperor's palace far away, the battle feed showed brief flashes, Imperial ships dying without a visible enemy. The Council gasped. The Emperor said nothing. Back in the nebula, Admiral Vareth barked orders, but the battle was already lost. The humans fought like nothing the Empire had ever seen. Their ships didn't stay still. They moved like living things, weaving through debris fields, striking and fading. Every Imperial counterattack missed, every trap failed. The Admiral felt a chill as realization struck him. "They're learning," he whispered. "Every time we fire, they adapt." A voice came through the comm again. Ruiz's voice, calm, distant. "You call yourselves eternal. But you cannot even learn to change." The final blow came when the HSS Vengeance fired its main rail cannon. The kinetic round tore through the Imperial Glory's core, splitting the massive flagship apart in a blinding burst. Silence followed. The battle was over. Hours later, only wreckage drifted where the mighty Third Fleet once stood. A single escape pod was recovered days later by a neutral merchant vessel. Inside was Admiral Vareth, unconscious but alive. When he awoke, he found a message burned into the pod's control panel, simple, sharp, and unforgettable. "We are humanity. Remember us." When the news reached the capital, the Emperor dismissed the council. He sat alone in the Grand Hall, watching the reports replay over and over. His empire had just lost the largest fleet ever assembled, 2,000 ships gone, and the enemy had not even taken losses worth counting. The Emperor clenched his fists. For the first time in his life, he felt something new: fear. He rose from his throne and walked to the balcony overlooking the city. The lights below shone bright, but he could feel the cracks forming. Rumors would spread. Worlds would question his strength. Fear would grow, and once fear took hold, control would fade. "Majesty," a voice said from behind him. It was High Scholar Tren again. "We have studied the human technology. It is beyond our understanding. They are efficient, ruthless, every ship built with purpose." The Emperor turned slowly. "Tell me, Scholar, what drives them? What makes them so strong?" Tren hesitated, then said, "Pain. They fight like those who have lost everything. Their strength is not in their machines, but in their will." Corran stared into the night. "Then we will take that will from them," he said. "If they fight for the past, we will give them no future." But deep down, he knew it was already too late. The humans had done something no one else had managed in 10,000 years. They had made the Empire bleed, and once an empire bleeds, it can die. Across the stars, the human fleet drifted silently, repairing and regrouping. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Captain Ruiz watched the wreckage of Imperial ships fading into the nebula's mist. Her expression was calm, almost sad. "Message to all units," she said. "We move to the next target. No delays. The Emperor will strike harder next time." Commander Yates nodded. "And us, Captain? How far do we go?" Ruiz looked at the stars, her eyes cold as steel. "As far as we must, until the galaxy remembers what the Empire made of us and what it cost them." Outside, the fleet vanished once more into the dark, leaving behind only silence. But the silence was not peace. It was the sound of an old power breaking and a new legend rising to take its place. And a new legend rising to take its place. The galaxy trembled under the quiet weight of rumor. No one spoke openly of the battle at the Varan Nebula. But every traitor, every soldier, every slave heard the same whisper. The invincible fleet had vanished. The Empire tried to control the news, but truth moves faster than light. It passed through cargo holds, through drunken barrooms, through encrypted pirate signals. Humanity. The word felt strange on alien tongues, harsh and sharp, like the sound of steel cutting stone. On the palace world, the Emperor's silence was worse than anger. He had not spoken to the council for days. He spent his hours in the war room studying the recordings, frames of human ships moving like hunters through fog, their weapons slicing through dreadnoughts as if through paper. The images played again and again, reflected in his cold eyes. He did not blink. Outside the chamber, High Scholar Tren waited with a trembling message pad. He carried something the Emperor had demanded, a full genetic and historical analysis of the mysterious species. When the door hissed open, he stepped inside carefully, as if entering the den of a beast. "Speak," the Emperor said. Tren swallowed. "Your Majesty, we have confirmed that the humans are not of any known origin, but there is something curious. Their genetic line shows traces of species from the old Terran cluster." Corran's eyes narrowed. "Terran?" "Yes, Majesty. A system recorded in ancient exploration logs. lost more than 6 centuries ago after a failed colonization attempt. The records show, he hesitated, that the early empire conducted a harvest there. A slave extraction, the emperor turned slowly. A harvest, he repeated. We took their people? Tren nodded weakly. It was standard practice in that age. The empire required labor for the core forge, but the records say the operation was abandoned after heavy resistance. Entire ships destroyed by improvised weapons. The survivors were forgotten. The word hung in the air like a curse. Corin felt something heavy settle in his chest. A ghost from his own empire's past had returned, born of pain and vengeance. He straightened, forcing the thought away. Summon an envoy, he ordered. If these humans want to speak, we will speak. If they want blood, we will give it to them. Far across the stars, Captain Ruiz watched the faint outline of the Imperial capital glowing in the hologram. Around her, officers moved quietly, their faces pale in the light of distant suns. Humanity had never stood this close to the heart of their enemy. Transmission from the Empire, Commander Yates reported. Formal request for parley, Ruiz nodded slowly. They finally remember us. She turned to the communications officer. Accept secure channel. No weapons charged. Let them believe they control the room. Moments later, the screen shimmered to life. The Imperial envoy appeared. A tall, silver-skinned diplomat wrapped in royal robes. His eyes darted nervously across the human bridge, trying to read the strange symbols, the cold precision of the ship's interior. I am Envoy Solaris, he said. I speak for His Eternal Majesty Emperor Corin. You have violated our borders and slaughtered our fleets. We demand to know your purpose. Captain Ruiz stood with her hands behind her back. Our purpose? Justice. Solaris blinked. Justice? Against whom? Against the empire that enslaved our ancestors, she said quietly. You call it history. We call it memory, he frowned. There is no record of such. Ruiz lifted a small device. A projection flared into life, showing ancient footage, grainy but clear. Imperial banners, soldiers dragging human prisoners through red sand, slave ships leaving orbit. The envoy's breath caught. The crest on the soldier's armor was unmistakable, the same sun and 13 stars. Your people came to our world, Ruiz said. You burned our cities. You took our children to die in your factories. Then you left, thinking we would vanish. But we learned. We built. We remembered. The envoy's face went pale. These are ancient crimes. The empire of today is not... The blood on your hands does not age, Ruiz interrupted. Her voice was calm but cold as space. Tell your emperor we do not seek his throne. We seek truth. Let him face what his kind did. Solaris trembled. He had spoken to countless warlords, pirates, rebels. None had frightened him like this quiet human woman. She spoke not with hate, but with certainty, and that made her terrifying. I will deliver your message, he said. His voice cracked. But know this. The Emperor does not forgive. Ruiz gave a thin smile. Neither do we. The transmission ended. For a long moment, silence filled the bridge. Then Yates exhaled slowly. You think he'll come for us? Ruiz nodded. He'll try. Pride will drive him, but pride is predictable. Prepare defensive patterns alpha through gamma. We'll be ready when he does. In the palace, Envoy Solaris knelt before the Emperor's throne, his face pale as marble. Around them, the court was silent. They showed me. The past, Majesty, he whispered. Proof of what we did. The Emperor's gaze was distant. And you believed them? They had evidence, Your Majesty. They knew things no other species could know. Corin rose, the golden plates of his armor glinting under the light. Then it is true. We created our own destroyers. The room stayed silent. The Emperor's voice hardened. Ready the First Legion. If the humans want to face truth, let them do so at the end of our cannons. He turned to his generals. Send word to every system. The full weight of the Empire moves at dawn. The stars burned bright when the two fleets met again. It was not a battle born of surprise this time. It was something colder, inevitable. Human ships waited near the black dwarf star of Ephra, their hulls glowing faintly from heat absorption. The Imperial Legion arrived like a storm, filling the void with light. Over 3,000 ships, banners flying, engines roaring. It was the greatest force the galaxy had ever seen. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Captain Ruiz watched the scanner. "They've brought everything," Yates said quietly. "Good," she replied. "Maybe they'll finally listen." When the Imperial flagship hailed them, Ruiz accepted immediately. The Emperor himself appeared, his face ancient and sharp. "So," he said, his voice echoing through the bridge, "you are the ghost of Earth." Ruiz met his gaze. "We are what you left behind. Why fight?" Corrin demanded. "You have strength. You could have built your own empire." Ruiz shook her head. "We did build one. Inside ourselves. One you could never conquer." The Emperor studied her, searching for weakness. "You think you are better than us?" "No," she said softly. "We just learned what it means to lose everything." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Corran gave a thin smile. "Then you will lose it again." The connection cut. The void lit up with war. The Imperial Legion advanced in perfect lines, their energy cannons blazing. But the humans had prepared the field. Behind the Black Dwarf, they had placed mirrored satellites that reflected the star's dying light into focused beams. As the Imperial fleet entered range, the mirrors flared, blinding sensors and overloading shields. The humans struck like lightning, slipping between formations, firing kinetic rounds that tore through hulls. The Empire's discipline turned into chaos. Inside the Emperor's flagship, alarms screamed. "They're inside our formation," shouted an officer. "They're everywhere!" Corrin gripped the railing. "Regain control! Push them back!" But it was already too late. The human fleet wasn't fighting for victory. They were sending a message that the Empire's order was an illusion. Within hours, the mighty First Legion was broken, ships scattered, commanders killed or captured. And when the guns finally fell silent, only the Emperor's flagship remained. A channel opened again. Captain Ruiz's face appeared on the Emperor's screen. "It's over," she said quietly. Corrin's eyes burned with rage. "You think this changes anything?" "Empires rise and fall. We will rebuild," Ruiz shook her head. "Not this time. Because now the galaxy knows you can be defeated." Her image flickered out, and the human fleet vanished into warp space, leaving behind the wreckage of what had once been eternal. The Emperor sank slowly into his throne, the echoes of battle still ringing in his ears. Around him, the palace lights dimmed, and for the first time in 10,000 years, he understood what it meant to be afraid of the dark, be afraid of the dark. The silence after the war was louder than the guns had ever been. Across the Empire, broken ships drifted through the void, their beacons pulsing weakly like dying stars. Whole worlds that had once sung hymns to the Emperor now whispered prayers to no one. The mighty First Legion was gone, and with it the illusion of eternal power. Yet the Emperor still lived, and that, he told himself, was enough. In the deepest chamber of the Imperial Palace, the Emperor sat alone before the ashes of his ancestors. The light from the great stained dome above painted his face in fractured colors. He had not spoken in days. The court waited outside, terrified of what might come next. Every servant knew that the Emperor's silence was never peace. It was the sound of something building, like thunder before a storm. He finally rose, his golden robes falling from his shoulders, revealing armor still scarred from the last war. "Bring me the survivors," he said quietly. Within an hour, a small group of battered soldiers stood before him. Their faces were gray with exhaustion and grief. One of them, a captain with a missing arm, knelt and tried to speak, but his voice broke. "Majesty, we fought as you commanded. They weren't like anything we've ever faced. They don't fight for land or wealth. They fight as if they've already died once and refuse to stay dead." The Emperor's gaze hardened. "And yet you live!" The captain hesitated, unsure if that was praise or an accusation. "Only because they let us. They sent us back." "Sent you back?" The Emperor frowned. "To deliver a message?" The captain nodded weakly. He reached into his uniform and pulled out a small data crystal. "It was in our ship's logs when we woke. No one saw who placed it there. Corrin took it." The crystal pulsed faintly, and when he placed it on the projector, an image appeared, a human figure standing before a broken imperial banner. It was not Captain Ruiz. This one was older, perhaps a general, his voice quiet but steady. "We are not your enemy," the hologram said, But we will not forget. You taught us pain. You taught us fear. And in that fire we found ourselves. If you wish to understand us, look into your own history. You will find us there." The message ended. The Emperor stared at the empty air for a long time. When he finally spoke, it was to no one in particular. "They think they can shame us with the past," he said softly. "They think they are the only ones who have suffered." He turned to his guards. "Summon the Scholars' Circle. If our ancestors created this threat, then somewhere in their records lies its undoing." On the outer rim, the human fleet was silent. They had not pursued the retreating Imperials. The war, as far as they were concerned, was over. But peace was never simple. Captain Elena Ruiz sat in her quarters aboard the Vengeance, staring at a small photograph, a relic from old Earth. It showed her great-grandparents, two figures standing before a ruined city. The caption beneath was faded, but she knew the words by heart. "We survived." "That's enough." Commander Yates entered quietly. "Report from the scouts, Captain. Imperial activity on the core worlds is low. Their fleet's scattered. Looks like they're licking their wounds." Ruiz didn't look up. "They'll come back." "Pride never dies easy," Yates nodded. "The crew's asking, what now?" "We've done what we came to do." "Do we keep pushing?" Ruiz placed the photo on the table. "We came to show them that the Empire could bleed. Now they know." "But that's not enough. Then what is?" She leaned back, her eyes distant. "Change, real change. The kind that makes them remember, not through fear, but through truth. If we vanish now, they'll call us monsters. We need them to understand why we came." Yates frowned. "You think they'll ever understand?" "Maybe not," she said softly. "But someone has to try." Weeks passed. The galaxy held its breath. For the first time in living memory, the Empire did not command the stars. Outer colonies declared independence. Slave races began to rebel. Trade routes turned silent. In a dusty mining settlement on the edge of Imperial space, a rumor spread faster than light. Humans had landed there. The locals gathered at the ridge to watch as 3 sleek ships descended through the crimson sky. When the dust cleared, the figures that stepped out were not conquerors. They were lean, armored, and quiet, carrying no flags. Their leader removed her helmet. It was Captain Ruiz. She looked around at the terrified crowd, then spoke in a steady voice. "We come with no armies, no demands, only a story." The miners stared, uncertain. "A story?" one asked. "Yes," she said. "The story of what your empire did to us and what it turned us into." For hours, she spoke to them, showing old records, the footage of Earth's fall, the harvest ships, the enslaved generations. By the end, no one spoke. Some cried. Others fell to their knees. When Ruiz finished, she simply said, "You have a choice. Keep believing in an empire that forgets its sins, or remember them and be free." The next day, the settlement declared itself independent. Within a month, 20 others followed. When word of this reached the Emperor, his fury shook the palace walls. "They are spreading poison," he roared. "They are turning our people against us." High Scholar Tren stood trembling. "Majesty, their words reach hearts faster than our ships reach worlds. We can crush their fleets, but not their story." "Then we will burn their story," Corin hissed. "Every world that listens to them will burn." But as the orders spread, resistance grew faster than the flames. Even Imperial soldiers began to hesitate, unsure of which side they truly served. And through it all, the humans never struck again. They vanished from battlefields, leaving only whispers and hope. Some said they were rebuilding. Others said they were watching. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Ruiz received the reports with quiet satisfaction. "They're fighting themselves now," Yates said. "Their people are tearing down the banners faster than we ever could." Ruiz nodded. "Empires fall from within. We just gave them the mirror." Yates smiled faintly. "You really think they'll learn?" Ruiz looked at the stars. "They will, one way or another." Months later, a strange sight filled the sky above Imperial Prime. Thousands gathered as something descended through the clouds, not ships, not weapons, but a single probe. It drifted slowly down, wrapped in light. The Emperor himself stood on the balcony as soldiers surrounded it. The device opened with a hiss. Inside was a crystal tablet, engraved in simple, blocky letters, the same alphabet that had haunted the Empire since Tryon 9. The Emperor lifted it, and for the first time in years, he read aloud. "We did not come to conquer. We came to remind you that no empire is eternal. If you wish to rebuild, build better. If you wish to rule, rule with mercy. Humanity watches." The words echoed through the grand square. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, people began to kneel, not to the Emperor, but to the truth written in his hands. That night, the Emperor stood alone at his window, staring at the stars. The city below was silent. In that silence, he finally understood what the humans had given him. Not defeat, but reflection. He whispered to the darkness, "Perhaps you are right. Perhaps we were never gods." And far away, aboard the Vengeance, Ruiz looked out into the same stars and murmured, "No gods, just survivors." The fleet drifted on, leaving behind a galaxy that would never again call itself invincible. The story of humanity spread like starlight, soft, endless, and unforgettable. Endless and unforgettable. The Empire's banners came down one by one. First on the rim worlds, where fear had turned to anger, then across the mid-sectors where loyalty had never been love but habit. By the time the banners fell from the palace walls of Imperial Prime itself, no one came to raise them again. The age of the Empire had ended not in flame, but in silence. The Emperor had not been seen in months. Some said he had fled to the core sanctums beneath the capital. Others whispered he had died quietly in his sleep. But none of those who ruled in his name dared to claim the throne. The golden seat stood empty beneath the great dome of the palace, the light of a fading sun spilling across its polished steps. On the edge of the galaxy, in the quiet black between the stars, humanity watched. The fleet no longer moved as a weapon. It drifted now like a shadow with purpose. Inside the Vengeance, Captain Ruiz stood at the observation deck, her hands clasped behind her back. Before her stretched the map of the galaxy, a map that no longer glowed with imperial borders. The lines of power had dissolved into dust. Commander Yates approached, his face older now, the war having carved new lines around his eyes. "They're tearing down what's left of the old order," he said. "You did it, Captain." "The Empire's finished." Ruiz didn't smile. "Empires never finish, Yates. They just change their names." He frowned. "Then what happens now? We leave them to rebuild?" Ruiz turned to look at him. "We were never here to rebuild for them, only to remind them that no rule lasts forever. The rest they must learn themselves." She paused. "But we can't stay. The longer we linger, the more we become what we fought against." Yates nodded. "The fleet's ready for deep drift. Most of the crew's eager to head home." Ruiz's gaze softened. "Home," she said quietly. "I wonder if Earth would even recognize us anymore." Across the galaxy, new flags rose. On worlds once crushed under imperial law, free councils formed, uneasy coalitions of species and colonies that had once been enemies. They called themselves the Concordant. Their fleets were small, their governments clumsy, but they shared one strange custom. Every meeting began with a single phrase spoken in the human tongue: "Remember the lesson." In a mining colony on the frozen moon of Calor, a small child asked his mother, "Were the humans gods?" The woman smiled sadly. "No, my child. They were something harder to understand. They were people who refused to stop fighting when everyone else had given up." The child frowned. "But why did they leave?" "Because," she said softly, "they didn't want to rule us. They wanted us to rule ourselves." The boy thought about that for a long time. Then he whispered, "Do you think they'll come back?" The woman looked up at the stars, glimmering through the thin atmosphere. "Only if we forget." On a forgotten world, far from any trade route, in the ruins of what had once been a human research outpost, a group of explorers uncovered something buried deep beneath the soil. It was a small metallic orb, still humming faintly after centuries. When they opened it, a voice filled the air, a woman's voice, calm and strong. "This is Captain Elena Ruiz of the human fleet," it said. "If you're hearing this, then our mission is complete. We did not come to conquer or to punish. We came because we were broken once, and we wanted the galaxy to understand what it means to heal. If humanity is gone, then remember this: our strength was never our weapons. It was our memory. The explorers stood in silence. The orb's light faded, but the echo of the voice remained in the cold air like a heartbeat. From that day, the world was renamed Vengeance's Echo, and every visitor who came to study its ruins left a single flower at the crater's edge. Back aboard the Vengeance, Ruiz stood on the bridge for the last time. The fleet was preparing for deep hibernation, its final voyage into the void beyond mapped space. No one knew if they would ever return. She looked over her crew, every face marked by the journey they had shared. "This galaxy is no longer ours to change," she said quietly. "We showed them what we needed to. Now they'll write their own stories." Yates stood beside her. "And us?" She smiled faintly. "We'll find another sky, maybe one untouched by war. Do you think there's such a place left?" he asked. Her gaze drifted to the stars beyond the viewport. "If there isn't," she said, "we'll make one." The engines came alive, a low hum spreading through the decks. The stars outside began to blur, light stretching into streaks as the fleet prepared to vanish into the unknown. Ruiz took one last look at the galaxy they had changed. "Set course," she said. "Beyond the frontier." The Vengeance and its sister ships rose together, engines glowing white-hot against the black. Then, with a silent flash, they were gone. Centuries passed. The Empire became myth, its name remembered only in old texts and half-forgotten songs. The Concordant became the foundation of a new order, one that prized freedom above fear. Yet in every academy, in every history lesson, the same question echoed: who were the humans, really? Some said they were ghosts. Others said they were angels sent to test the arrogance of kings. But one ancient scholar, studying fragments of their transmissions, wrote a different answer. "They were not divine," he said. "They were what happens when suffering learns how to fight back. And though humanity had vanished beyond the rim, their legacy endured. The ships they left behind, drifting like monuments, became holy sites for travelers. Pilgrims visited them in silence, tracing their names across cold hulls: HSS Vengeance, HSS Atlas, HSS Orion. Every ship carried the same inscription, etched deep into the metal: "We are humanity. Remember us." One day, long after the last emperor's name had been forgotten, a strange signal reached the edge of concordant space. It was weak, almost lost in the noise of the cosmic background. But a young technician picked it up and amplified it. At first, it was only static. Then came a voice, faint and distant, but unmistakably human. "To any who hear this," the voice said, "we found it. A world untouched by war. A place where the stars still sing. We called it Haven." The transmission ended. No coordinates, no beacon. Just a promise. The Concordant debated for years whether to search for Haven, but none ever found it. Still, travelers claimed that sometimes, in the deep dark between galaxies, you could see strange ships moving, metallic shapes with names no one had spoken in generations. And when those ships passed, the stars seemed to burn a little brighter, as if remembering an old story whispered long ago. On a quiet night in a small colony far from any capital, a child sat by a fire looking up at the stars. "Mother," he asked, "do you think the humans are still out there?" The woman smiled, brushing his hair back. "Maybe not," she said softly. "But what they believed in still is." "What did they believe in?" the child asked. She looked up at the sky, where a faint streak of light crossed the heavens. "That even the smallest voice can change a galaxy," she said. "That no one stays forgotten forever." The child watched the light fade and whispered, "I'll remember." And above them, somewhere beyond the rim where no empire dared to go, a single ship drifted through the black, its engines dim but alive. On its hull, a single word remained untouched by time, glowing faintly against the endless dark humanity. Against the endless dark humanity. The sky of Haven shimmered with 3 suns, each a different color, one gold, one white, one faintly blue. The light wove together into a haze that danced across the silver oceans and mountains of glass. It was a world untouched by war, untouched by the scars of empires. The humans had found it by chance, or perhaps by something deeper, a kind of destiny born from centuries of exile. Captain Elena Ruiz stood on a high cliff, the wind pulling at her short gray hair. Below her, the first human settlement spread like a constellation come to life. Domes of crystal steel, gardens blooming under thin air, towers that reached for the heavens but carried no weapons on their peaks. For the first time in her long life, she heard no alarms, no transmissions of distress or victory, only wind and waves and peace. Commander Yates joined her, his boots crunching against the pale stone. "It's strange," he said quietly. "We spent so long fighting for peace, I almost forgot what it looks like." Ruiz smiled faintly. "Peace isn't what it looks like, Yates. It's what it feels like when you stop running." They stood in silence for a while. In the valley below, children played near the water, laughter echoing in the warm air. It was a sound that had become almost mythical among their kind. Humanity had been born in war, reborn in revenge, and now, after centuries, it was finally learning how to live again. But the universe never stays still for long. Far beyond Haven, in the fractured remains of the old Galactic Empire, explorers of the Concordant discovered something strange. A dead system on the edge of mapped space where the light of the stars bent the wrong way. Ships that entered it sent only fragments of messages before disappearing entirely. The last signal contained 3 words, distorted but clear. "They are coming." The Concordant Council gathered in the great station of Dalaris. Among the representatives was a historian from the archives of Vengeance's Echo, a woman named Lyra Dane. She had spent her life studying the ancient human wars. Now she stood before the council with a grim expression. "These readings don't belong to any known weapon," she said. "The energy signature matches nothing in our databases. Not human, not imperial. Something older? Older than the Empire?" one delegate asked. "Older than humanity," she replied. "Something buried in their wake." The chamber fell silent. The Concordant had been built on hope, not fear. And yet the idea of another power rising from the void felt too familiar. "What do you propose?" the chairman asked. "We must find the humans," Lyra said. "If anyone understands how to fight what's coming, it's them." On Haven, the humans had begun to forget the shape of fear. They had built libraries, schools, temples dedicated not to gods but to memory. Each sunrise felt like a promise that the wars would never return. But then the sky cracked. It began with a shimmer, like heat on the horizon. The scanners on the Vengeance, still orbiting as the colony's guardian, picked up distortions beyond the outer moon. At first, they thought it was an asteroid storm. Then the storm moved. "Contact multiple signatures," a technician called out. "No transponders, no recognizable patterns. They're just shifting." Captain Ruiz, older now but still sharp, stepped onto the bridge. "Visual," she ordered. The screen came alive with darkness. Shapes moved through the void, vast, fluid, glimmering like oil. Not ships, not machines, something alive, something ancient. "They're feeding on the light," Yates said, horror creeping into his voice. "They're eating the stars." Ruiz stared for a long moment. "Prepare defensive grid. Wake the council. Send a signal to Concordant space. Tell them the void has awakened." The first attack came within hours. The creatures, no, entities, moved faster than anything known. They didn't fire weapons. They simply absorbed. Shields melted. Energy drained away. Communication collapsed. The outer colonies on Haven's moons went dark one by one. Ruiz stood before her officers as the alarms wailed. "We faced an empire that thought it was a god," she said, her voice steady. "Now we face something that may not know what it is at all. Remember who we are. We endure, we adapt, we survive." The crew nodded. Humanity had fought the impossible before. They would do it again. The Vengeance launched into the upper atmosphere, its hull blazing with re-entry heat. The humans activated the planetary defense rings, ancient technology rebuilt from the ruins of the old wars. Massive rail arrays locked into position, their barrels aimed toward the sky. When the first entity descended, it looked like a shadow given form, its body twisting through dimensions like smoke in water. The defense grid fired. The air itself rippled with kinetic energy. The impact lit the night brighter than dawn, And for the first time, the darkness screamed. Weeks passed. The war for Haven was unlike anything before. The enemy didn't die easily. When one fell, another emerged from the rippling void left behind. But humanity learned, just as they always had. They studied the fragments left after each battle, slivers of alien matter that hummed like living code. Ruiz watched as her scientists analyzed it. "It's not life as we know it," one said. "It's energy given hunger, maybe even thought." "Then we feed it something else," Ruiz said. "Find what it wants. Then give it what it fears." Through every loss, every night that the sky burned, humanity adapted. They learned to weaponize their own light, projecting pulses that turned the entity's hunger back upon themselves. The creatures recoiled, retreating toward the edges of the system, but Ruiz knew they would return. Yates found her standing again on the cliffs above the city. "If they keep coming," he said quietly, "we can't hold forever." "I know," she said. "But forever isn't the goal. Survival is." He hesitated. "You think they're after us?" "No," she said, her eyes on the dark horizon. "They're after what we represent. Life that refuses to be silent." Months later, a concordant fleet finally arrived, hundreds of ships carrying every species that humanity had once freed. They found Haven scarred but standing, and waiting for them at the docking ring was Captain Elena Ruiz. "You came," she said. The concordant commander bowed. "We heard your call." "You face something we do not understand," Ruiz smiled faintly. "Neither do we. But understanding isn't what keeps you alive. It's remembering." Together they rebuilt the line. Humans and aliens, side by side, defending the world that symbolized everything the galaxy had learned from its mistakes. In time, the entities withdrew, fading into the darkness between galaxies. No one ever discovered what they truly were. Some said they were the universe's way of testing those who believed in eternity. Others believed they were drawn to the light of civilizations, born whenever pride grew too bright. But when they were gone, the stars over Haven shone clearer than before, as if washed clean. Captain Ruiz watched the sunrise one final time, her reflection caught in the glass of the observation dome. "We fought for memory," she whispered. "And now we've given them one worth keeping." Yates stood beside her, smiling faintly. "You think they'll remember us?" She looked up at the sky where 3 suns burned in harmony. "They'll have to," she said. "The light demands it." And when the humans of Haven sent their last transmission to the galaxy, it was simple, spoken in every language at once. "We are still here. We always will be, not because we conquer, but because we endure." The message spread across the stars, echoing from world to world. And wherever it reached, life stirred a little stronger. The old empires faded. The new ones grew wiser. And in the endless dark, somewhere beyond the rim, the legacy of humanity continued. Not as conquerors, not as saviors, but as the quiet fire that taught the universe how to remember. Quiet fire that taught the universe how to remember. Centuries passed. The galaxy changed again. Haven's name became a symbol, then a myth, then a quiet echo in the stories of children who had never seen its light. The concordant grew and flourished, spreading across thousands of systems, weaving hundreds of species into one fragile, hopeful web. They built libraries of light that floated in orbit around stars. They carved peace treaties into moons. They looked up at the stars and believed that, perhaps this time, peace would last. But nothing lasts forever. In the great archives of the concordant capital, a young historian named Cale Wren studied the oldest surviving transmissions from the age of humanity. They were fragile things, half-corrupted recordings, fragments of sound buried under static. Most scholars dismissed them as legends, exaggerated memories from a species that had long vanished beyond the galactic rim. But Cale did not. He was one of the few who believed the stories were true. He spent nights alone, listening to the ancient voices whisper through the static, "We endure. Remember us. No empire lasts forever." The words haunted him. And one night, as he adjusted the playback frequency, a new signal emerged, one no record had ever shown before. It was faint, barely a whisper beneath the static. But it was clear. If you hear this, then the dark has returned. Do not call for us! Become us. Kale froze. The voice was unmistakably human, female, strong, and weary. He replayed it again and again, his heart pounding. The date embedded in the file placed it thousands of years after the last known human transmission. That was impossible, unless humanity had never truly disappeared. The next day, Kale went before the Concordant High Council. "We've been wrong," he said. Humanity didn't vanish. "They warned us, the council chambers filled with murmurs." The elder speaker, a tall being of translucent skin and ancient eyes, leaned forward. "Warned us of what?" Kale projected the recording. The voice filled the hall, soft but unshakable. When it ended, silence followed. "It's a fabrication," one delegate said. "An echo," said another. "Old transmissions bouncing through the void." But the speaker's gaze remained fixed on the projection. "No, it's not an echo. It's a message. Then from where?" Kale demanded. The speaker turned toward the great map of the galaxy, its stars glittering in holographic perfection. He extended one long, pale finger toward the black beyond the rim. From the place where light goes to die. Across the galaxy, stars had begun to fade. Not all at once, not yet, but slowly, quietly. One by one, systems went dark. The void that humanity had once fought on the edge of Haven's sky was returning. Kale was assigned to a research vessel sent to investigate one of the fading systems. As they approached, their sensors screamed with interference. Gravity twisted. Space itself felt wrong. In the silence, he thought he heard whispers, not through comms, not through speakers, but inside his mind. "Do not call for us. Become us." When they reached the central star, they saw it. A black sphere hanging where the sun should have been, absorbing light, life, everything. It was the same darkness that had come for Haven, only now it was larger, older, hungrier. "Record everything," the captain ordered. "We have to warn the Concordant." But before they could turn back, the blackness moved. It wasn't a planet or a void. It was alive. It pulsed once like a heartbeat, and every system aboard the ship died at once. No light, no sound. Only the hum of the creature, or whatever it was, growing stronger. Kale stared into the viewport and saw movement inside the dark, patterns like wings, like shadows learning to breathe. Then, a shape emerged. A ship. Human design, old but unmistakable. Its hull bore the faded letters, HSS Vengeance. The crew gasped. "That's impossible!" someone shouted. "That ship vanished millennia ago." But it was real, drifting out of the black, its engines silent. And when Kale looked closer, he saw figures standing at its windows. Humans, or something that had once been human. They glowed faintly, as if made of the same light the void tried to eat. One of them raised a hand in greeting, and then the ship vanished again, slipping into the dark as if swallowed by time itself. Kale returned to the Concordant capital with only fragments of data. The council dismissed his warnings. "Human myths," they said. "The void is a natural phenomenon. Stars die. It is the way of things." But he couldn't forget the ship, the faces, the impossible light in their eyes. He began to dig deeper into restricted archives, searching for any clue of Haven's fate. Most records claimed it had been lost when its suns burned out. But in one classified file, he found a single note, signed centuries ago by a Concordant explorer. "Haven endures. But not as you remember it. The humans have changed. They are not what they were. They have become the fire that darkness cannot consume." Kale stared at the words until his vision blurred. Humanity had not died. They had become something else. Something beyond flesh and metal. Something that lived in the very light itself. He had to find them. Kale left the Concordant without permission, taking a small vessel and vanishing into the frontier. He followed the fading stars, chasing whispers of human sightings, ships that glowed with impossible energy, fleets that appeared in dying systems just before the void arrived. In one system, he found wreckage, a Concordant colony stripped bare, every life erased. But there, amid the ruins, stood a single beacon. When he activated it, a voice filled the air. "To the children of the stars," it said. "You were never meant to worship us. You were meant to remember. We gave you the light so that when the dark returned, you would not hide from it. Now it is your turn. Cale fell to his knees. The voice was Captain Ruiz's, ageless, calm, eternal. He looked up at the sky, where the void spread like ink across the stars. Then teach us, he whispered. Show us how, the beacon flared. A beam of white light shot upward, cutting through the black. And from that light, shapes began to emerge. Human ships, sleek and ghostly, their hulls glowing like stars reborn. They did not speak. They did not need to. The message was clear. The humans had become the guardians of light. They no longer lived as flesh, but as echoes of energy, protectors of every living spark. The galaxy had called for them once, but they had known the truth all along. Humanity was not meant to return as saviors, but to awaken the same fire in others. Cale watched as the ghost fleet turned toward the dark, their weapons blazing not with destruction, but with creation, bursts of light that reignited the dead stars. The void recoiled, hissing, shrinking before their radiance. The last thing he saw before the light consumed everything was the Vengeance, leading the charge, its hull shining brighter than any sun. When the light faded, Cale found himself drifting in calm space. The void was gone. The stars were burning again. His ship's systems flickered back to life. On his console, one message waited. Simple, human, timeless. The fire is yours now. Keep it burning. He looked out at the restored stars, tears slipping down his face. We will, he whispered. And somewhere, far beyond what any telescope could reach, a figure stood on the deck of a ship made of light, watching. Her face was ageless, her eyes like twin suns. Elena Ruiz smiled faintly as the galaxy she had once saved learned to save itself. Her voice drifted across the stars, carried on the quiet wind of eternity. Humanity was never just us. It was every hand that reached for hope when the dark seemed endless. The stars flared brighter, as if bowing in answer. And so, long after the last empire crumbled and the last name was forgotten, the light of humanity lived on, not in blood, not in power, but in every soul that refused to surrender. Because in the end, that was what humanity had always been. Not a species, a spark, a promise, a fire that the darkness could never extinguish.